Imagine a quiet afternoon in Riverside Park, where Amara Thompson, a black woman, is immersed in her work, unaware that a single moment is about to upend her life. A veteran cop, driven by a gut feeling and a vague suspect description, zeroes in on her, calm, composed, and suspiciously out of place in his eyes. What starts as a routine check spirals into a shocking arrest, but there's a twist that will flip everything you expect. Who is Amara really? And what happens when the truth comes out? Stick around. This story of prejudice, power, and redemption will keep you hooked until the very end. Amara sat on a sun-dappled bench in Riverside Park, the late afternoon light filtering through the trees, casting intricate shadows on the ground. She was engrossed in a legal brief, her pen poised over the page as she jotted notes in the margin. The park was her haven, a place where the chaos of her high-stakes job at the U.S. Attorney's Office melted away, replaced by the gentle hum of nature and the chatter of families nearby. But today, her peace was about to be disrupted. What was coming next would change everything. Across the park, Officer Daniel Conway patrolled with a practiced eye, his boots crunching on the gravel path. 20 years on the force had honed his instincts, or so he thought. As his gaze landed on Amara, something in his chest tightened. A black woman, alone, dressed too sharply for a casual park visit, her focus too intense. Who sits like that, so poised in a public park, he thought, his suspicion flaring. There'd been vague reports of a suspect in the area, female, mid-30s, possibly involved in a fraud scheme. The description was flimsy, but to Conway, Amara fit the bill. Why was she so calm? What was she hiding? Amara sensed the weight of someone's stare and glanced up from her brief. She spotted Conway, his posture rigid, his eyes locked on her with a look she knew all too well, judgment cloaked in authority. She'd faced this before, too many times to count. Her heart sank, but she refused to let it show. Closing her folder deliberately, she met his gaze, her expression steady. Conway's hand twitched toward his radio, unnerved by her composure. She's too confident, he muttered to himself, starting toward her. What was her story, and why did she seem so unafraid? "Afternoon," Conway said as he reached the bench. His tone clipped, laced with an edge that betrayed his intent. "Afternoon," Amara replied evenly, her hands resting on the folder in her lap, visible and non-threatening. She knew the script, knew how this could unfold if she didn't play it carefully. "What brings you out here?" Conway asked, his eyes flicking from her face to the folder, searching for a crack in her calm demeanor. "Just reviewing some work," Amara said, gesturing slightly to the papers. "It's a nice day for it." Her voice was smooth, but inside, she braced for what was coming next. Would he push further, or would he let it go? Conway nodded, but his suspicion deepened. The folder, the polished attire, it didn't add up. "You from around here?" he pressed, shifting his stance to loom slightly over her. Amara's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes remained sharp. "I've been around," she said, her tone polite but firm. She wasn't going to give him an inch he didn't deserve. The vague response grated on Conway. "Mind if I see some ID?" he asked, his voice hardening. This was the moment. Would she comply or would she challenge him? Amara's smile faded. She knew her rights, knew she wasn't required to show ID just for sitting in a park. But she also knew refusing could escalate things fast. "Am I under arrest?" she asked, her voice calm but pointed, her eyes locked on his. Conway bristled, her question hitting like a challenge. That composure, that refusal to flinch, it threw him off. "You will be if you don't cooperate," he snapped, his hand resting on his holster. What was she hiding that made her so bold? Amara took a slow breath, weighing her options. She could push back, assert her rights, but the risk wasn't worth it. Not here, not now. "I'm just sitting in a park," she said evenly. "Is there a law against that?" "You fit the description of someone we're looking for," Conway said, the words sounding hollow even to him. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "ID! Now!" Amara held his gaze for a moment longer, the air between them crackling with tension. She could feel the eyes of nearby park-goers turning toward them, the weight of their attention adding to the stakes. Finally, she reached into her bag, moving slowly, deliberately, and pulled out her wallet. Conway watched her every move, his body tense. She handed over her ID and he snatched it, glancing at the name, Amara Thompson. It meant nothing to him, but his mind was already made up. "Stand up," Conway ordered, stepping back. "Turn around." Amara sighed inwardly, but complied, rising from the bench with grace, her hands still visible. As Conway pulled out handcuffs, she felt a surge of frustration but kept it buried. The cold metal clicked around her wrists, biting into her skin as he tightened them. Whispers from onlookers filled the air, but Amara stayed composed, her mind already shifting to what would come next. She wasn't worried. She knew who she was, and soon Conway would too. But the weariness of this moment, the exhaustion of being judged for her skin, weighed heavily on her. Conway led her to his patrol car, his grip firm on her arm. As they walked, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off, but his pride pushed it aside. He opened the back door and guided Amara inside, the tension still thick. As the car pulled away from the park, Amara looked out the window, the greenery blurring past. How had a quiet afternoon turned into this? And what would Conway do when the truth came out? At the precinct, the patrol car's engine cut off, and Conway opened the back door, helping Amara out. Her wrists ached from the cuffs, but her expression remained unreadable. Inside, the precinct buzzed with activity, phones ringing, officers typing reports. Conway led her through the main hall, ignoring curious glances from colleagues. He wasn't ready to explain this arrest, not until he was sure of his ground. At the booking desk, Officer Ramirez looked up, his eyebrows rising as he saw Amara. "What's this about, Conway?" he asked, taking her ID from Conway's outstretched hand. "Caught her acting suspicious in the park," Conway said curtly. "Wouldn't cooperate." Ramirez glanced at the ID, then at Amara. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, quickly masked. He typed into the computer, his fingers pausing briefly. Amara caught the hesitation, filing it away. Someone here knew who she was, or at least suspected. "Captain Sullivan's in her office," Ramirez said, handing the ID back to Conway. "You'll need to take her there." Conway stiffened. Captain Elena Sullivan was a no-nonsense leader, known for her sharp mind and strict adherence to protocol. He hadn't planned on involving her so soon, but there was no avoiding it now. "Let's go," he said, his grip tightening slightly on Amara's arm. As they approached Sullivan's office, Amara sensed Conway's unease, the first crack in his confidence. She noted it silently, her own composure unshaken. Conway knocked, then opened the door when Sullivan called out. The office was orderly, with a large desk and shelves of legal texts. Sullivan, a woman in her late 40s with a commanding presence, looked up from her paperwork. "Officer Conway," she said, her tone neutral. "What's this about?" "Caught this woman in the park, Captain," Conway said, guiding Amara inside. "Acting suspicious, wouldn't cooperate when I asked for ID." Sullivan's gaze shifted to Amara, and for a split second, her eyes widened in recognition before she schooled her expression. "Is that so?" she said, her voice measured. Amara met her gaze, seeing the awareness there. Sullivan knew who she was, but was playing it carefully. What game was the captain playing? "That's right," Conway continued, unaware of the silent exchange. "I brought her in for questioning." Sullivan leaned back, her eyes narrowing. "And did you have probable cause to arrest her?" Conway hesitated, the question hitting a weak spot. "She wouldn't cooperate, Captain." he said, his voice less certain. She fit the description of a suspect. Sullivan's expression didn't change. Officer Conway, step outside. I'd like to speak with Miss Thompson alone. Conway blinked, caught off guard. But Captain... Outside, Sullivan repeated, her tone firm. Reluctantly, Conway released Amara and left, closing the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, Sullivan's demeanor softened slightly. Ms. Thompson, I apologize for this misunderstanding, she said, her voice low. I know who you are. Amara allowed a small smile. No need to apologize, Captain. You're doing your job, but I'd prefer we keep my position quiet for now. Let's handle this by the book. Sullivan nodded, respect in her eyes. Of course. I'll speak with Conway and ensure this is resolved appropriately. But why didn't you tell him who you are? Amara's smile faded, her expression serious. Because it shouldn't matter, Captain. My job title shouldn't be what makes him treat me like a person. Sullivan considered her words, then nodded. You're right. It shouldn't. But it does for some. She stood, moving to the door. I'll call Conway back in. Let's get this sorted. As Sullivan opened the door, Conway stepped inside, his expression wary. He sensed the shift in the room but couldn't place it. Ms. Thompson is not the suspect you were looking for, Sullivan said firmly. Release her immediately. Conway's jaw dropped. What? But Captain, immediately, Sullivan repeated, her voice like steel. Conway hesitated, then fumbled for the keys to unlock Amara's cuffs. His hands shook as the realization of his mistake began to sink in. As the cuffs fell away, Amara rubbed her wrists, giving Conway a measured look. Thank you, officer, she said, her tone calm but weighted. Conway swallowed, muttering, You're free to go. Amara turned to Sullivan. I'll be in touch, Captain. We have more to discuss. Sullivan nodded. I look forward to it, Ms. Thompson. With that, Amara walked out, leaving Conway with a sinking feeling. The confrontation was over, but the consequences were just beginning. What had he done? And how much would it cost him? Conway sat at his desk, the precinct's hum a distant noise against the storm in his mind. He couldn't focus, the events of the day replaying in a loop. He knew he'd messed up, but the full scope of his error eluded him. Footsteps approached, and he looked up to see Sullivan, her expression stern. My office now, she said, turning without waiting for a response. Conway followed, each step heavier than the last. Inside her office, Sullivan closed the door and sat behind her desk, her gaze piercing. Officer Conway, do you know who Amara Thompson is? Conway shook his head, dread pooling in his stomach. No, Captain. Just some woman in the park. Sullivan leaned forward. She's not just some woman. She's an Assistant U.S. attorney, one of the best in the district. You arrested a federal prosecutor based on nothing but your own assumptions. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Conway's mouth went dry, the implications crashing over him. A prosecutor? He whispered, his voice cracking. That's right, Sullivan said, and her arrest is going to have consequences. For you and this precinct. Your actions were driven by bias, not evidence. You can't arrest someone just because they don't look like they belong. Conway wanted to protest, to defend himself, but the truth was undeniable. I didn't know, Captain, he said, his voice trembling. I didn't know who she was. That's the problem, Sullivan replied. It shouldn't have mattered who she was. Your job is to protect, not to judge. She sighed, her tone softening slightly. You're on temporary leave while we investigate. There'll be a review, and depending on the outcome, you could face termination. Conway's heart sank. Termination. The word echoed in his mind, a death knell for his career. He'd been a cop for decades, and now it was all slipping away because of one reckless decision. I understand, Captain, he mumbled, his voice hollow. Sullivan stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "You're dismissed, Conway. Reflect on this. We can't have officers acting on prejudice." Conway left the office, the precinct's familiar sounds now alien. As he drove home, Amara's calm, unflinching gaze haunted him. She'd seen through him from the start, and now he was paying the price. Sitting in his car outside his house, the weight of his actions pressed down. For the first time, he questioned who he was without the badge, and whether he'd been the officer he thought he was all along. The precinct was quieter than usual as Conway stood outside the conference room, his heart pounding. The official review was about to begin, and every word he said could decide his fate. He adjusted his uniform, trying to steady his nerves, but the man in the window's reflection looked worn, uncertain. Could he justify his actions, or was the truth too heavy to escape? Inside, the room was tense, lined with internal affairs officials, high-ranking officers, and at the far end, Amara Thompson. Her presence hit Conway like a blow. She sat calmly, her eyes studying him with that same quiet authority that had unnerved him in the park. Captain Sullivan took her seat, her expression unreadable. "Officer Conway," Sullivan began, "this review is to evaluate your actions during the arrest of Ms. Thompson. We'll examine the events, your conduct, and the consequences. Do you understand the gravity of this?" "Yes, Captain," Conway said, his voice low. He glanced at Amara, then back to Sullivan, his palms sweating. "Let's start with your report," Sullivan said. "You arrested Ms. Thompson because she matched a suspect description. Female, mid-30s, possibly involved in fraud. Is that correct?" Conway nodded. "Yes, Captain. She was alone, acting suspiciously, and when I asked for ID, she was evasive." "Evasive how?" Sullivan pressed. "She didn't show her ID right away," Conway said, the words feeling weaker with each syllable. "She seemed like she was hiding something." Amara's voice cut through, calm but firm. "I was reviewing legal documents, Officer Conway, not exactly criminal behavior." Conway flinched but stayed silent. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. "Did you find anything on Ms. Thompson indicating criminal activity?" "No, Captain," Conway admitted, his voice barely audible. "She was clean." A heavy silence settled. An internal affairs officer spoke up, his tone stern. "Did it occur to you that Ms. Thompson might have been telling the truth? That she wasn't the suspect?" Conway's throat tightened. "I was following protocol," he said, grasping for justification. "We're trained to assume someone might be dangerous until proven otherwise." "But were your assumptions influenced by factors beyond protocol?" the officer asked pointedly. Conway froze, the accusation hitting home. "I didn't mean to profile her," he said, his voice faltering. "I was just doing my job." Amara leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Your job is to protect and serve, Officer Conway, not to judge based on appearance." The words stung, and Conway felt a wave of guilt. He'd been wrong, and there was no escaping it. Sullivan cleared her throat. "This review isn't just about that day. It's about the mindset behind your actions. We need officers who uphold fairness and justice." Conway nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I understand, Captain." Amara spoke again, her tone measured but authoritative. "Captain, may I?" Sullivan nodded. "Of course, Ms. Thompson." Amara stood, commanding the room. Being a police officer is tough. The pressure can lead to mistakes. But those mistakes can't go unchecked. This isn't just about Officer Conway. It's about ensuring this doesn't happen again. It's a chance for change, and I hope this precinct takes it seriously. Conway listened, her words sinking in. He'd spent years believing he was doing right, but now he saw the harm he'd caused. Amara sat down, her gaze still on him, not malicious, but resolute. Sullivan turned to Conway. "You'll remain on leave while we continue this review. Use this time to reflect. We'll reconvene soon." Conway nodded, numb. The meeting ended, and as the officials filed out, he stayed seated, the weight of his actions crushing him. He'd come to defend himself, but now he saw the truth. Glancing at Amara one last time, he met her eyes, steady, determined. He looked away, unable to hold her gaze, and left the room, the consequences looming like a storm. Captain Sullivan sat in her office, the investigation report on her desk. The decision was made, but the work was far from over. A knock announced Amara's arrival. Sullivan stood, smoothing her uniform. "Come in," she called. Amara entered, her demeanor calm. She nodded politely and sat across from Sullivan. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Thompson," Sullivan said. "The investigation is complete. Officer Conway will be terminated." Amara nodded. "I appreciate the thoroughness, Captain. But will this lead to real change?" Sullivan paused. "It's a step. Conway's termination sends a message that racial profiling won't be tolerated. But we're also revising training to address bias and de-escalation and implementing stricter oversight. It's not enough, but it's a start." Amara's eyes softened. "It's about changing mindsets, not just policies. That takes time, but I'm willing to work with you to make it happen." Sullivan felt a surge of respect. "Your insight is invaluable, Ms. Thompson. We're committed to this, and your voice will be heard." Amara stood, extending her hand. "Thank you, Captain. Let's make this a turning point." Sullivan shook her hand. "We will." As Amara left, Sullivan turned to her phone, ready to set the reforms in motion. The road ahead was tough, but she was determined to see it through. The precinct buzzed with a new energy as Amara walked up the steps, the air heavy with anticipation. Inside, a bulletin board displayed upcoming workshops on bias and de-escalation. Officers moved with purpose, their conversations subdued. The past weeks had left a mark, and change was taking root. In Sullivan's office, Amara found the door ajar. She knocked and entered, greeted by Sullivan's warm smile. "Good to see you, Ms. Thompson," Sullivan said. "Likewise, Captain," Amara replied, sitting. "How's progress?" "We're rolling out training and oversight measures," Sullivan said. "There's pushback, but most officers see the need. We're building a foundation rooted in fairness." Amara nodded. "Keep the momentum. This can't be a one-off." "Agreed," Sullivan said. "This is about the community and our officers." The door opened, and Conway stepped in, holding a cardboard box. His face was drawn, his eyes shadowed. "Captain," he said stiffly, avoiding Amara's gaze. "Brian?" Sullivan replied, neutral. Conway turned to Amara, his voice tight. "Miss Thompson, I didn't mean for this to happen." Amara met his eyes, calm but firm. "It's not about intent, Officer Conway. It's about impact. You have a chance to learn from this, to grow." Conway nodded, the weight of her words settling. "I'll think about it," he said, then turned to Sullivan. "Good luck, Captain. And to you, Ms. Thompson." He left, the door closing softly. Sullivan sighed. "I hope he'll be okay." "It's up to him now," Amara said. "We focus on what's ahead." They sat in silence, the weight of their work settling. Amara stood, shaking Sullivan's hand. "Thank you, Captain. We're in this together." As Amara left the precinct, the officer's eyes followed her, some curious, some thoughtful. Change wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. Stepping into the cool morning air, she felt a spark of hope. The fight for justice was just beginning, and she was ready to lead it, one step at a time. Wow, what a story, right? If Amara's journey hit home or got you thinking, smash that like button and hit subscribe to join our community. We're diving into more powerful stories like this every week. Don't miss out on our other videos. We've got real-life dramas, inspiring tales, and thought-provoking discussions waiting for you in the playlist below. Turn on notifications so you never miss a drop, and come back for more stories that spark change and keep you hooked. See you in the next one.